Hello, everybody, and welcome into episode 1 of the Emmitt Sevores Show. This is kind of a rebrand of the C Team Pod. Dallas and I have not been able to figure out a schedule that works for both of us. So the C Team Pod, we won't see episodes of that anymore. Again, Dallas and I are not like mad at each other. We're still very good friends. We'll see him on every once in a while, but it was just too hard for both of us to figure out a time that worked, so that we would both be able to do the show consistently. All that sort of stuff. So we're just gonna, start fresh, rebrand, new show, episode 1. And who else would I bring on for my first episode of my new show? Then go talk with Marcus. Marcus, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty tired actually. But no. I appreciate the invite. I'm glad to be here, especially if this is the first episode of the Emmitt Sevores Show. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, hey, let's get right into it. Let's save all the crazy stuff, all the thank yous and stuff like that. Let's get into the Packers. You and me both Packers fans. They're facing off against the Vikings tomorrow. Their playoff life is on the line. They need to win. Granted, they can get in some other ways if they do lose this game. But they would need a lot of help. They need the Commanders to lose out. I think they'd need the Seahawks to lose to the Rams. They'd need the Lions. I think they could still knock the Lions out, beating them in the last week of the season. But really, this is their best chances. They have to win out, and then they need Washington to lose one. And that all starts tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1:25 here on the West Coast. Marcus, do you think that the Packers can beat the Vikings tomorrow?
Can the Packers beat the Vikings? Sure. There's no there is nothing, and this isn't like just the fandom. This is when you look at it, there is nothing that would lead me to believe that we can't beat the Vikings. We have the ability to. Our problem is Joe Barry. And Joe Barry, as he did in week 1 and as he's done countless times over the course of the season, Joe Barry is likely going to be the reason why the Packers lose, should they lose. I mean, this is a meaningful game in January in Lambeau, a divisional opponent against a dome football team. This spells, or should spell, Packer victory when it's all said and done. But again, Joe Barry is going to find a way to get in the way. And don't get me wrong, the Vikings are a good football team. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is closing in on history. Kirk Cousins hasn't been playing that bad himself. His defense has been a lot better than I thought it would be. Kevin O'Connell is firmly in the Coach of the Year discussion. Obviously, they've already clinched the division. They've already clinched the playoffs. But they have all these things going for them, right? So, obviously, because it's a divisional game, the Vikings aren't going to rest their starters. We're going to see a full-strength Vikings team come Sunday, because what more would the Vikings love to do than be the reason why the Packers aren't in the playoffs? Of course, we can win this game. This is a winnable game. We have seen the Vikings be very, very human. The Vikings are not world beaters. The Vikings are not an unstoppable football team. I get it. They're 11-0 in one score games, but they've had some bad losses. The losses that they've suffered have been bad losses. And despite being 11-0 in close games, they haven't played that great throughout the course of the season. They're 12-3 with a point differential of +5. Now, a lot of that is anchored down by the 37-point loss to the Cowboys and the loss to the Eagles earlier in the season in primetime as well. But the Vikings are not this invincible, unstoppable, world-beating football team. This is not a team that you look at and you say, yikes, chances are slim. It's a divisional game. It's Aaron Rodgers playing against the Vikings at home in Lambeau. Christian Watson's been playing good ball. Nixon's been playing great ball as a returner. The only two things that are going to keep us from winning this game are Joe Barry just making stupid decisions, i.e. not letting Jair Alexander follow Jettis throughout the course of the game, and also Matt LaFleur not getting the ball to the two best players on the team, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. As long as we run the ball, as long as Joe Barry doesn't make dumb mistakes, we should walk out of Lambeau with a win and keep our playoff destiny, for the most part, in our own hands.
Yeah, I truly think that if we are able to win out, I think we're going to get in. I think the Commanders pulling Heineke and now putting in Wentz. Wentz is very spotty. If he plays very well this week, I don't think he's going to play well next week. And you even look at the two teams they're playing. Yeah, the Browns aren't playing super well. Deshaun Watson's looked really bad since coming back from suspension. But the Browns, I think they still are a average football team, which is what I think the Commanders are, and honestly what I think the Packers are. So I think that game can go either way. And we saw Cooper Rush the Commanders play the Commanders play the Cowboys in the final week of the season. We saw their backup quarterback Cooper Rush beat them by 15 earlier this year. Who's to say they can't do it again? Their defense has been super underwhelming. So I think if the Packers are able to win out, I think it's very likely that they get into the playoffs. But this week, health is going to play a huge role in this game. The Vikings starting center, is already out there. Backup center, I think he's allowed 15 pressures in 3 games. Kenny Clark and Davante Wyatt should have a field day up the gut for that. But then health on the Packers side, Christian Watson, you talked about how big of an impact he's had. He's questionable with a hip. Granted, he's questionable and not doubtful, so I feel a lot better about it. He practiced, I think, the past day or past 2 days. Keyshawn Nixon, he didn't practice, but he's listed as questionable as well. He didn't practice yesterday. But I do think, at least in Nixon's case, him not practicing is probably a good thing. I don't think they're going to throw him out there at corner. I think he's just going, if he is playing, he's just going to go out there and be our returner. But yeah, the Vikings, as you kind of talked about, they haven't been super overwhelming this year on anything. Their defense is 5th to the bottom in terms of points per game. They're giving up almost 25 points a game, 24.9 to be exact. Their offense hasn't exactly been world-beating either. I mean, they've put up a good amount of points per game. They're just they're inside the top 10. I think they're at 7th in points per game. They're with 25.5. But again, they have not necessarily been world beaters. I don't think, they only are averaging 10 more yards per game than the Packers offense that we all think is borderline putrid, or at least was for a while. But we're going to have to see a vintage Aaron Rodgers performance, because if we don't have Christian Watson, I don't think we have a chance to win. Even with him, I think it's still going to be pretty tough. ESPN's given us a 60% chance to wind up winning this game. They're favored in the game by, I believe it's 3. So kind of exactly what you would expect for a division home game. But Rodgers is going to have to pull something out that we haven't really seen from him all year. He hasn't passed for over 260 yards all year. He only has 1 game of 3 touchdown passes all year, and that was against the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to have to see something like that. We're going to have to see, where he's up there in completion percentage around 70, where he's probably at like 300 yards, something like that. We're going to have to see a game where he's not turning the ball over. Granted, it hasn't bitten us the past couple of games, and the Miami interception should have been called back for a pass interference, but Rodgers has games with, even going back to the start of the season against Minnesota, 1 interception, no touchdowns, 1 interception, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. He has that a couple of times against Buffalo, New England, as well as Tampa Bay. He had the really bad game versus Detroit with 3 picks. And then, Philly, 2 picks, and then the Rams and Miami games, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. We're going to have to see something in him play a lot more consistent than he has all year. I think if he has all of his guys back, we should see him play a little bit more consistently, and especially if we're going to have both of the playmakers on the offense and the receiving core back. If Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson are playing, I think the Packers should be able to win this game. Just like you, I'm going to pick the Vikings to win the game just because I think that for whatever reason, this Vikings team seems to have like a team of destiny vibes. Kind of like like the 2018 Bears, where they thought it was their division for the long haul, but really it wound up just being that 1 year sort of thing where you're like, how are they even winning games? You already talked about the point differential. The Packers have not necessarily been fantastic in 1-score games. They haven't been horrible, but they haven't been great. I think they're 3-4 in 1-score games, but the Vikings, their 1-score game luck is going to run out at some point. But I think if this game's close towards the end, I can't trust the Packers. I've seen them in close games with the Lions. They lost. I've seen them in close games with the Commanders. They lost. The Giants, they lost. Even like the Vikings game that was out of hand score-wise, I felt was still a fairly close game-ish, and they lost. Their defense couldn't get a stop versus the Eagles. Their offense couldn't put up anything versus the Titans. I think that I for sure a little bit have kind of been blinded a little bit by this win streak, right? They've beaten 2 teams that haven't been very good, or, that are bottom 5 teams. And then they were losing by 10 points before Tua got a concussion, allegedly, and threw us 3 picks. and maybe that says something good about the defense, finally being in position. And, they've had really bad luck with dropping the picks that they should get, or, getting bad bounces. So maybe that luck is starting to finally come back our way. But I think that the Vikings just have some luck to them. Again, I'm rooting for the Packers, and I'm even hoping that this is somewhat of a jinx. But I'm going to take the Vikings in a close one. I'm going to take them 27-24.
Yeah. We're going to lose, but it'd be nice if we win.
I think so too. But if they don't win, that will take us towards looking towards the offseason and what we do with our quarterback position. But a place that we should also be looking at upgrading is our wide receiving core. Davante Adams does not seem super pleased with Derek Carr now being benched. He kind of talked about it in his press conference a little bit. Not happy. He obviously left Green Bay to go to Las Vegas to go play for the Raiders, to go play with Derek Carr. And now it seems like Derek Carr, as we were talking about before the show, doesn't seem like he's going to be a Raider next year whatsoever. So, how realistic do you think it is for the Packers to trade for Davante Adams? And then do you think that the Packers should trade for Davante Adams?
It's not going to be realistic. I mean, we know what this is. Derek Carr is done as a Raider. He's going to get traded to the Bucks or to the Commanders or the Jets or somewhere. And Tom Brady's going to be the quarterback of the Raiders next year. And Davante Adams isn't going to want to leave because he'll be playing with Brady. And the Raiders won't let him leave because they'll want Brady to play with Davante Adams. So, I mean, should we trade for Davante Adams? I mean, I don't see why not. But honestly, we shouldn't, because at this point, like, trading for Davante Adams, we're going to have to give up more to get him back than what we got in return for him at the beginning of this year's offseason. Like, it's not going to be worth it in the long run, I don't think, because, like, okay, maybe Aaron Rodgers does come back next year. Maybe he does. Does he come back the year after that? Like, we're still always going to be in this constant, like, will he, won't he thing with Aaron Rodgers of, like, is this year going to be his last year? He's going to come back once again. And that's just not a good space to be in. The offense is not the worst. There have been the Packers offense has struggled for a litany of reasons. A lot of it has to do with the fact that there's been some injuries up front in the trenches, and that's where games are won. A lot of it has to do with the fact that receivers have dropped footballs a lot in the first half of the season. A lot has to do with the fact that whether he wants to admit it or not, a lack of execution on the part of Aaron Rodgers to just put the ball where it needs to be, like we've seen him do time and time again over the course of his career in Green Bay. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Matt LaFleur just refuses for some reason throughout the course of the season several times to just not get the ball in the hands of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, whether it be as runners or as receivers out of the backfield. And then he turned around and gets on a post-game presser and says, well, it's unacceptable that we only ran the ball 5 times. Yeah, well, like, you're calling the plays, dude. Like, if you want them to run the ball more, then call more run plays. Like, that's just how it works. So I say all that to say, while I'm sure a lot of Packer fans think it would make a lot of sense for us to bring Davante Adams back, I don't think it would make a lot of sense, right? Because we're seeing Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, they're kind of coming in and they're kind of being what they need to be, which is really good receivers. And I think they've shocked a lot of us. I don't think a lot of us expected Christian Watson to be this way because we didn't see him much of the course of the offseason and training camp and preseason. We saw Romeo Doubs, we're all shocked. We're like, oh yeah, Romeo Doubs is legit. Christian Watson, we didn't really think so. And he's not going to win it, but he has slowly over the past couple weeks creeped his way up the charts in Vegas as far as betting odds are concerned to an offensive rookie of the year. He's not going to an offensive rookie of the year though, but he's a talented wide receiver, as is Romeo. Allen Lazard has been dealing with injuries all season. He's still talented. Could this wide receiver core be better? Absolutely, this wide receiver core could be better. But what happens when we have Davante Adams is this offense in close situations, down the stretch of football games, just becomes completely stiff. And we're only going one way. Now, granted, when you have the best receiver in football, it works. Like, you can only go the one way to Davante Adams. We've seen time and time again it work. But when you've got Christian Watson, when you have Allen Lazard, when you have Romeo Doubs, what I'm afraid of is if the Packers do decide to maybe inquire about bringing Davante Adams back, and if the Raiders say, okay, yes, let's just blow it up, and maybe they're not going the route of Tom Brady. What I don't want to happen is for us to begin to have a repeat of what happened in 2021, in 2020, 2019, 2018, and all these years when we looked at Davante Adams, he was being that guy, and down the stretch, Aaron Rodgers didn't want to look anyone else's way but Davante Adams' way, and now the offense becomes really, really stale. The offense becomes really, really stagnant. I don't want that. This is an offense that I think this season has been forced to explore its options and look other ways. Look at Lazard, look at Watson, look at Dobbs, look at Jones out of the backfield as a receiver. Look at Dillon out of the backfield as a receiver. Hell, look at Mercedes Lewis as a receiver at the tight end position, which is crazy to think about in the year of our Lord, almost 2023. So in a perfect world, honestly, Davante Adams would have never not been a Packer to begin with. He would have still been a Packer today. But if you're asking me, do I think we should give up draft capital or give up young players to go get Davante Adams and bring him back just to be right back where we were just really almost a short season ago at this time last year? I'd have to say no, because the dynamic is going to go back to being this really stressful, really stiff, really inconsistent offense when it really, really, really matters most. I get it. I don't want to go back to being regular season warriors. Like I want us to be competing for championships. And whether you guys like it or not, Packers fans, we weren't really competing for championships. We were, but we weren't. We were stiff. We just had a good team. We won the games we were supposed to win, struggled in the games that against good teams, and somehow managed to win games. Like, this is the same football team that a few short years ago was the worst 13-3 football team ever. Not like exaggerating, but like statistically, this is the worst 13-3 football team ever. Like, offensively, defensively, you look at some of the 13-3 football teams. Offensively, that Packers team was not up to par. Defensively, that Packers team was not up to par. Coaching wise, that team was not up to par. Somehow we managed to get the job done to become 13-3. Of course, we've blown it time and time again. I saw a tweet the other day, and it makes a lot of sense, right? The Packers are best when they're not the 1 seed or the 2 seed, or when there's no expectations. The Packers are at their best when they have when they have like a chip on their shoulder and no expectations. Because when Aaron Rodgers has no expectations and he chip on his shoulder, he wins back-to-back MVPs. He becomes, I think at the time, the first or maybe one of the very few 6 seeds in the history of football or the history of the NFL to win all road games and then ultimately win the NFC or the Super Bowl. Like, that is who Aaron Rodgers is when there are no expectations and he thinks everyone's counting them out. That's what we need. We don't need this Aaron Rodgers guy he's got his nose up in the air and he's got his chest poked out and he thinks he's the guy and he is, but he's not. And there's all these expectations of let's put him on the championship picture because now he wants to go on Pat McAfee's show. Love Pat McAfee, but want to go on the Pat McAfee show for Aaron Rodgers Tuesday and talk down on this team and talk down on that team, talk about this guy, talk about that guy, and then show up on Sunday and like play kind of lackluster football, but just enough football where it's not bad and they win I don't want that. I like has it been stressful this season? Of course, it's been stressful this season, but I would much rather see an Aaron Rodgers that has no expectations, that has something to prove, even though he's old. I'd much rather see an Aaron Rodgers that has no expectations where people are cutting him out than an Aaron Rodgers with expectations, because an Aaron Rodgers that is expected to do something time again has showed us that he will fail. And if we bring Davante Adams back, the Packers will go back from being this team that everyone's doubting to a team that everyone thinks is supposed to be competing for a championship. And when Aaron Rodgers is expected to win championships, he doesn't win them. When he's not expected to win championships, he's in the conversation, and the Packers somehow stumble their way into a championship like we did, 12 years ago at this point almost. So, no, we should not trade for Davante Adams. Let's just focus on what we have right now and build it.
Yeah, and I honestly, I was willing to go on either side of this argument. I think the Davante Adams being upset, I think has gotten overblown a little bit. Like, everyone's he only went to Vegas to play with Derek Carr. I don't think that's 100% true.
He was also never upset either. He said that several times. He was never upset. Yeah. He just wanted to go play with his friend.
It's like he's not Davante Adams being frustrated with the Raiders now. I think is a little bit, again, overblown. Yep. People are forgetting, not only, he was going there to play with his college quarterback. Yeah, Davante Adams grew up a Raiders fan. His dream was to play for the Raiders, whether now it's Vegas, used to be Oakland. He also said something in a press conference earlier this year that I think was the first home game of the season for him. Obviously, it didn't end well. It was the Cardinals one, I believe. But Davante Adams was his grandparents were able to see him play professional football for the first time. And I think that means something to him. I mean, you and me have watched plenty of Davante press conferences. He's a family-oriented guy. That means something to him. Being able to have his family, his grandparents, being able to go watch him play, I think means something. So I think that he's automatically going to ask out now that he was, obviously this season and the whole reunion with Derek Carr has not gone the way he wanted it to. And it seems like they've played their last game together in the NFL, at least as members of the Raiders. But Davante Adams, I still think he wants to be a Raider. Will he eventually make his way back to Green? Do I think he's going to retire a Packer? I do. Eventually, I think he's going to retire a Packer because I think he misses it there. I think you've seen kind of his Twitter over the past couple of days. He's liking purely Packers tweets. He's like, he liked something about Aaron Rodgers. He liked the video of, I think, Rasul Douglas intercepting Rasul Douglas picking off Tua. I think that genuinely he does still care about the Packers. But I think his unhappiness has been overblown a little bit. But let's play this game as if he is unhappy, because then I think it also branches off into two arguments. If Aaron Rodgers is coming back next year, I think getting Davante Adams would be smart, because I think it shows that you're going all in. Because personally, what I think is going to happen is I think Rodgers plays one more season. He has one more year. Again, I don't think he's going to retire at the end of this year. He's not saying no to $63 million. He's just not whatsoever. In no world does that happen. But then I think after that, I think the Packers are going to pick up Jordan Love's fifth-year option and kind of say, that was your last year, man. Like, sorry, that was it. We gave you your last one. And I think that if Aaron Rodgers is planning on coming back, because I think the media has also kind of overblown the tradability of Aaron Rodgers, the Packers are going to take on a lot of dead cap from trading Rodgers or cutting Rodgers or Rodgers retire. Like, the contract is bad for them every way you slice it. So I think that the tradability of Rodgers has gotten a little bit overblown, where I don't think he's not tradable. I don't think he wants to get traded. He's kind of talked about his Packers legacy multiple times. He wants to be one of the guys who retires. He was drafted a Packer. He stays a Packer. He retires a Packer, doesn't touch another uniform. The only time he's picking up another jersey is for a jersey swap. That's the only time. He doesn't want to be anybody. He does not want to be a member of any other 31 NFL franchises. But if Rodgers is coming back, I think getting Davante Adams would be a good thing, because I think, although you make very good points in terms of Rodgers has gotten too dependent on Davante Adams. You saw it in the playoff game. He wouldn't throw it to anybody else. He had Allen Lazard wide open in the middle of the field that would have put them in field goal range, and likely, if Mason Crosby eventually makes the kick, sends them to the next round of the playoffs, sends them to the NFC Championship game at home versus the Rams that they already beat by, I think, 2 or 3 scores earlier in the season. But instead, he forced it into double coverage and Davante Adams. Whether that was he just missed the read or he trusted Davante more than Allen Lazard, either way it happened.
It's always both with him. It's always, I trust Davante Adams, so damn the read.
Yeah, see, there is that. And so I understand those points. But I also think that this Packers receiving core, if they're not going to draft it all, if they're not going to draft a wide receiver, which I think they should, I've had my eyes set on Jackson Smith and Jigba for a long time. Ever since I believe it was he played in a game in 2020. It was one of the best catches I've ever seen. I'm sure you've seen the highlight too, where he it's a blowout game. Like, he was one of the backups at that point, thrown in the air. It looks like he's about to be out of bounds, and he somehow gets his foot in and drags it. I've had my eyes set on him since then. So I want the Packers to take a wide receiver in round 1. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not, which is why I'm fine giving up some sort of draft assets for Davante Adams, because I think that it makes the offense a little bit more explosive. The number 1 corner is obviously going to be on Davante Adams, obviously. But then I think that it opens up Christian Watson, who I think this year has proven, although I was not a fan of him at the beginning of the year. I did not like the draft pick. I've been wrong so far. He has better hands than Marquez Valdez-Scantling did. He has better hands. He has better speed than Marquez Valdez-Scantling did. He's a better runner with the football than Marquez Valdez-Scantling was. I think that what it does is it gives them a similar wide receiving style to what the Cowboys had last year. They would have an elite route runner in Amari Cooper, Davante Adams. Obviously, Davante's a tier above Amari Cooper in the rest of his game. They would have an elite speed threat, CeeDee Lamb, versus Christian Watson, and Watson has better speed than Lamb does. And it would give them a fantastic jump ball receiver, Romeo Doubs, just like Michael Gallup. And I think that it would set this offense up to be very good for the future. But again, if Rodgers isn't coming back, just start fresh. Just start fresh. I don't think Davante's talked about one of the reasons that I think he could potentially leave. I don't think he does, but one of the reasons he could is because he talked about one of the reasons he wanted to not get out of Green Bay, but one of the reasons he wanted to go to the Vegas is because of the stability at the position. He doesn't want to have to deal with Rodgers. Oh, maybe I'm coming back. Maybe I'm not. But now Carr's gone. And let's say Brady signed. How many years does Brady have left? 1, 2, maybe, depends. He's right back in the situation that he wanted to avoid. And so I think going back to Green Bay, knowing Jordan Love, not dealing with a wild card Raiders front office of what's going to happen. Yeah, I'm sure they want Tom Brady. Does Tom Brady want to go there? I would if I was Tom Brady, but I'm not sure if he will. I think that it's going to be definitely interesting to see how Davante Adams' offseason looks. He's also not very tradable. He's in that category where I think the Raiders would take on like a $40 million dead cap hit or something crazy if they try to move on from Davante Adams. But hey, if they're looking at, a full-on rebuild or anything in the sort of that, I could see it potentially happening. Let's move on to another polarizing team. That's the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, their fans have been saying that they are Super Bowl contenders for the past, 27 years. But this year they have one of their better teams. They have one of their best defenses in the past 15 to 20 years. Their offense, ever since Dak Prescott has come back, outside of their turnovers, has been good. They've only put up less than 27 points per game once, and that was in a game against Detroit, where they won by 3 scores. Granted, it was a close game, a closer game than the score indicated, but their offense has looked really good. Their defense has slowed down, but it was really good, and they still are an extremely opportunistic defense. You see that with the 4 turnovers that they forced against Gardner Minshew, and everyone kind of talks about how, if Jalen Hurts there, they don't make those turnovers. Well, it's like, 2 of them were running back fumbles, and then 2 of them were fantastic plays on the ball for interceptions. It's not like it was that was a horrible pass by Minshew. Deron Bland wrestled that ball away from, I believe it was it Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown? He wrestled it away from whoever the receiver was, Quez Watkins. But the Cowboys team this year seems a little bit different to me. And again, everyone's been saying that for a while. But Marcus, do you think that they can win the Super Bowl?
I thought the Cowboys could win the Super Bowl from the offseason, really. I think that's just kind of the expectation that you have to have when you're the Dallas Cowboys. That's the pressure that was kind of placed on Mike McCarthy's shoulders by Jerry Jones indirectly when he mentioned that there are options at the coaching position. Jerry Jones recognizes that Sean Payton isn't gone forever. And Jerry Jones recognizes that if Sean Payton were to come back, one of the places that he could come is to Dallas. Mike McCarthy, I'll give Mike McCarthy credit. Mike McCarthy has done above average coaching. He's done an above average coaching job this season. I'm not going to say he's done an exceptional job. I'm not going to say he's great. I'm not going to say he's in a coach of the year conversation because the Dallas Cowboys still lack discipline. He still can't manage the clock. But listen, and maybe I get hate for this. Maybe I don't. I've gotten to a point where with this take, I don't care if you hate me or not. It's just the truth, right? Any team that has a top 5 defense and a top 10 quarterback and a top 15 receiver is usually a Super Bowl contender. And the Cowboys have that. The Cowboys have had this season a top 5 receiver. CeeDee Lamb is a top 15 receiver, and I think he's answered the question of can he be a number 1 receiver this season? He's been exceptional this season. He's had a career year this season. Dak Prescott, I understand he's missed 5 games this season. He now leads the league in interceptions with 14. But let's not forget, about half of those interceptions are not on him, right? One of those picks he threw in that game against Tennessee the other day, tight end had it in his hands, just couldn't hold on to it for whatever reason, right? Excuse me, right? That pick against Noah Brown against Jacksonville last week that ultimately sealed the deal for them in overtime. Noah Brown, that ball hit his hands, and he admitted himself, that ball hit your hands, you got to catch it. That ball hit his hands, he couldn't catch it. It pops into the hands of the defender, goes the other way. And we've seen that time and time again with Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys this season. The Cowboys can win the Super Bowl. I think you look at this football team. Here's the thing. The first time they played the Eagles, there was no Dak. The second time they played the Eagles, there was no Jalen Hurts. So for all I'm concerned, and by the way, they split those games. Now, granted, the team that didn't have the backup quarterback won the game, which kind of makes sense. Your team has your starting quarterback to win the game. But I still think if Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts play both those games, I think the Cowboys win both those games against Philadelphia this season because they're the better team. They are the better team, right? I think as much slack as I give to Mike McCarthy about his terrible coaching, let's get one thing clear: he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback or head coach, and he has the experience of a head coach that you need in playoff situations. Nick Sirianni does not, right? Dak Prescott, despite having only won one of his 4 playoff games in his career, Dak Prescott has experience in the playoffs, a lot of it. Jalen Hurts has played 1 playoff game in his career. right? I can go on and on and on and on and on. This Eagles team is a feel-good story, right? You have the guy who won over the locker room at the end of last season, rallied off all these great wins. The Eagles cannot stop the run. I don't care what you tell me. The Eagles have struggled with stopping the run all season, and we've seen if you pay close attention to what the Eagles and the teams that the Eagles have played this year, when the Eagles hold a team to under 100 yards rushing, give or take 10 yards, it's a blowout. Any other game, when they don't hold a team to under 100 yards rushing, it's a close game or a loss, like they did it, like against Cowboys, like against the Commanders, right? That game against I can't think of the team. That game against the Lions earlier in the season was a close game. Now, granted, they held the team to under 100 yards, I believe, but that offense was also playing really good that first week of the season for the Tory. Like this is a team that is susceptible to the run in Philly, and I think the Cowboys could beat the Eagles in the playoffs. Let's also not forget that the division is still on the line, right? So if you're asking me, can they win the Super Bowl? I'm looking at this from the perspective of, well, can they win the Super Bowl as a wild card or can they win the Super Bowl as a division winner? I think they can do both. If the Cowboys are having to go on the road as a wild card team, I'd like their chances less because they're going to have to go. Likely, they're going to have to go to Tampa Bay. They're going to have to go to San Francisco or Minnesota, and then to Philly for the NFC Championship game. But if the Cowboys can win this division, which it's still in play, because if the Cowboys win this week and the Eagles lose, like it's still possible. They're only one game behind, like despite what people want to make you believe. This is the Eagles have not locked up this division yet. They have a playoff spot. They haven't locked up this division yet. This division is still up for grabs. They win this week, they win the division. They win the number 1 seed in the NFC. I say all that to say, if the Cowboys can win this division, I think that 100%. Oddly enough, I think that makes their chances worse. Because the Cowboys, they just play with two. They play two. It's like us, dude. Like when we're the 1 seed, when the Packers are the 1 seed, they're played too stiff. When the Cowboys are at home in the playoffs, they play too stiff. I think the Cowboys should want to be the wild card team. I think the Cowboys should want to be doubted. I think the Cowboys should want to go on the road to Tampa Bay because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I don't care that it's Tom Brady. The Bucs have not been good this season. I think the Cowboys should want to play Minnesota because they stomped Minnesota earlier this season, the last time they played them. I think the Cowboys should want Philly because that's a perfect matchup. I think the only team in the NFC, the Cowboys, that stand in the Cowboys' way of winning the Super Bowl this year is the San Francisco 49ers, and that is because that's just who the 49ers are. Hell of a defense, hell of an offense, one of the best O-lines in football, one of the best pass rushing defense. I go on and on and on and on. Of course, you got Kyle Shanahan out there calling the shots. I definitely think if we are talking about I'll be honest with you, there's only 6 teams in the NFL that I think have a shot at winning the Super Bowl this year. It's Buffalo, it's Kansas City, it's Cincinnati, it's Philly, San Francisco, and Dallas. Dallas is in that good discussion. I understand the record doesn't show it, but the Cowboys are better than the Vikings. The Cowboys, I think you can make an argument that the Cowboys have a legitimate shot to beat the Eagles. And I think the only team that they would give them a lot of trouble is the San Francisco 49ers, right? And so to answer your question, yes, the Cowboys can win the Super Bowl. Now, the Cowboys also find a way to get in their own way when the pressure gets high, so when the lights are at their brightest. And that's my one concern. But I know it's against our religion as Packers fans to kind of give all the Cowboys all this praise because we're not supposed to. But the Cowboys have a top 10 quarterback. They've got a top 15 receiver. They have a top 5 defense and a decent head coach. Those 4 things are what you need to be considered a Super Bowl contender. The Cowboys have all 4 of those things. They are a Super Bowl contender this year.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on that one. I think, especially on your Eagles point, we'll talk about who the favorite is in the NFC. But right now, I like Dallas over Philly. I truly do, and for a lot of different reasons. One, Jalen Hurts has not been super fantastic when he's played Dallas with Dak Prescott. Obviously, you take a look at that last game, and everyone wanted to talk about when Gardner Minshew was in. Oh, they got 4 turnovers, and they whatever. They only beat us by 6. Well, you got 3 turnovers and only beat the Cowboys by 9 when they had their backup quarterback playing. So it's not exactly, even. Jalen Hurts, I'm trying to look up his record here. I believe he's played against Dak Prescott. I think it's 3 times, and I think he's 0-3. It might only be 2 times, but he hasn't played super well. He's thrown pick sixes to Trayvon Diggs, I think in both games last year, if I'm not mistaken. He threw interceptions and pick sixes to Trayvon Diggs. Yeah, they lost by 20 last year. Again, obviously, it's not the exact same team as it was last year. But I think that it does prove a point. They also lost by 20 the year before in that. And then I think, he played. And again, he lost by 20, not to Dak Prescott in 2020. In 2020, he lost to Andy Dalton by 20. He threw one touchdown and 2 picks. So we have no idea what Jalen Hurts is going to look like come playoff time. We have no idea. But with the Cowboys, Dak Prescott hasn't played a horrible playoff game. I truly don't think he has. You look at that game again, one of his best games he played against Green Bay in 2016, his rookie year. And the Packers it was one of the better Packers teams we've seen over the past 10 years. That was the run the table year. That was a team who got hot and Aaron Rodgers could not be stopped.
Yeah.
And Dak Prescott and the Cowboys took them down to the last second. They were tied at 28-all, 31-all, and it took one of Rodgers' all-time throws up the sideline to Jared Cook to beat those Cowboys. Then you move on to 2018. They beat the Seahawks. They beat the Seahawks, who had a number 1 rushing defense, or the number 1 rushing offense in the league. And it wasn't even really close. Yeah, the final score was. That game wasn't super close. The Cowboys dominated that game. It never felt like the Seahawks had a chance. If I'm not mistaken, the Seahawks actually in that game, I believe that the Seahawks scored like a close to last second touchdown to make the score look closer than it was, to cover the spread. But they weren't doing a whole lot. The Seahawks leading rusher was Rashad Penny for 29 yards. Chris Carson had 13 carries for 20 yards. They shut down that offense. And Dak Prescott, he didn't play super fantastic, but he played well. He had the biggest run of the game. He, dodged Bobby Wagner, dove for the first down on what I think was 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, somewhere around there. He played very well. Then the next week against the Rams, he played well as well. People think that just because you lose and you play for the Cowboys that you didn't play well and that you choked. It's just not true. Their defense gave up over 273 yards rushing. CJ Anderson was going for 5.3 yards a carry on him on 23 carries. Todd Gurley, back when he was still a thing, was getting around 7 yards per carry on 16 carries. back when he was in the league, man. Dak Prescott played well throughout that entire game. Their defense couldn't get a stop at the end. And even if you look at that San Francisco game, everyone, we're playing revisionist history here. What were we talking about the second that game was over? Were we talking about, oh, Dak played horribly? No.
Yep.
We were talking about the stupid call by McCarthy to call a quarterback draw with 13 seconds left. That's what we were talking about. Yep. And granted, that plays against the Cowboys too, because they didn't get rid of Mike McCarthy, so they still have him. But yes, this Cowboys team can go up with anyone in the NFC. I think they can probably go up with anyone in the AFC, to be super honest with you. Do I think that they'll win? Maybe not, but I think they can keep it a close game because that's what they've done all season long.
Dude, not to cut you off. And I know it's against our religion as Packers fans to do this. There are only 2 teams in football that I think the Cowboys can't beat: San Francisco and Kansas City. When the Dallas Cowboys are at their best, mind you, and look, if you don't like numbers, too bad, because I love them. Let me just give you some numbers, okay? No one in football has more fourth quarter pressures than Micah Parsons. No one in football has more a higher fourth quarter pressure percentage, obviously, than Micah Parsons. If I'm not mistaken, other than Nick Bosa and TJ Watt, no one else has more fourth quarter sacks than Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons and this defense as a whole, but Micah Parsons specifically, when it matters the most in crunch time in the fourth quarter, this is the same defense, by the way, that went off 33 unanswered in the fourth quarter against Indianapolis Colts. Now I get it, it's the Indianapolis Colts, but still 33 straight points in a game that heading into that point was 19-19. It was tied 19-19. They rattled off 33 straight. They ended up winning the game 54-19. Colts didn't see it coming. There are a lot of defenses in football that rely on turnovers, which is another reason why I'm not 100% sold on the Eagles, because they're one of those teams, right? The Eagles defense relies on turnovers to be effective, right? The Cowboys defense does not rely on turnovers to be effective. They have a playmaker at every single position. They've got a playmaker up front. They have a playmaker at the second level in the linebacker core. They have a playmaker in the secondary. That's what you need to be successful. Dak Prescott at his best is a top 10 quarterback. At his worst, he's top 16. He is above the Kirk Cousins line in the NFL of like kind of how you measure quarterbacks. And I think at this point, maybe that line is going to become the Derek Carr line, depending on how things go with Derek Carr the rest of the season. But Dak Prescott's top 10, undeniable. Argue with the wall. I don't care. The Dallas Cowboys the Dallas Cowboys with a backup quarterback. And I get it at the time, they weren't what they are now. With the backup quarterback, the Dallas Cowboys beat the Cincinnati Bengals in week 2 with a backup quarterback. You mean to tell me that if Dak's playing in that game, they can't beat the Bengals? And you, Emmitt, you know how I feel about Joseph Lee Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. I love me some Bengals, but they can beat them. I think, calling a hot take, I think the Cowboys could go to Buffalo, or it would be going to Buffalo, but I think the Cowboys could handle their own against the Buffalo Bills. We've seen them beat the Vikings. We know they can beat any other team that's in the NFC playoff picture except for the 49ers. They can beat any team that's in the AFC playoff picture right now except for the Chiefs. I think they could beat the Chargers, they could beat the Dolphins, they could beat the Patriots, they could beat the Jets, they could beat the Jaguars. Like, they can beat these teams. Look. I know it's easy to give the Cowboys, the football team, and Cowboys fans a hard time because it's been a little over a quarter of a century since they won a championship. It's been that same time since they've even been to a conference championship. They've been a joke for a large part of this, going 8-8, seemed like every other year for a stretch of time for the last decade. But let's forget the past and focus on the now. This Dallas Cowboys team in 2022 and 2023 in a couple of hours, this Dallas Cowboys team this season, despite Dak having thrown for 14 picks this season, despite missing 5 games, despite the fact that Ezekiel Elliott coming into the season had a big question mark on whether or not he could be the future of this team and remain on this team, despite the fact that there's been a huge step back as far as this O-line is concerned, despite the fact that they don't have Amari Cooper, despite the fact that they were missing Michael Gallup for some time, despite the fact that you can sit there and say that maybe Trayvon Diggs overrated, despite the fact that they have Mike McCarthy in charge of the clock, despite the fact that Kellen Moore forgets sometimes how to run this offense. This is a football team this season that has the pieces to win a Super Bowl this year. The only 2 teams that stand in their way are San Francisco and Buffalo. And if your team's not in San Francisco, if your team's not in Buffalo, I cannot sit here and say for certain I would pick your team over the Cowboys. Is there an argument to be made for the Bengals, the Bills, the Chargers, the Dolphins, or the Vikings, or the Eagles, or even the Commanders, even the Packers? Of course, there's always an argument. But definitively, there are only 2 teams definitively that I look at today and I say, these 2 teams, if these 2 teams match up with the Cowboys tomorrow, they're going to win. More than likely, it's the 49ers, it's the Chiefs. The Chiefs, why? Because of Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid. The 49ers, why? Because that's just who they are. Like, the 49ers have just been the NFL's spoiler. Doesn't matter what you have going on for your franchise. You step foot on the field with the 49ers, chances are you're going to lose because that's how well they've been constructed. I just want to it's so easy to crap on the Cowboys, but this Cowboys team this season, in this 2022-23 season, has a legitimate shot of making it to and winning the Super Bowl, and I don't think people are giving it as much credit and as much logistic thought as it deserves because it's the Dallas Cowboys and because of what they've gone through over the last 26, 27 years. That's all.
I agree. I definitely agree. Let's get into talking about the rest of the NFC and talk about our favorite. I think I know who your favorite is, and they're my favorite too. That's the San Francisco 49ers. I'll start with the Eagles because I really think that there's only 3 contenders in that NFC. It's the Niners, it's the Eagles, and it's the Cowboys. I think the weakest of the 3 truly is the Eagles, and some of it is just due to bad luck. Lane Johnson being injured, and yeah, he's going to be coming back for the playoffs. He's going to be dealing with that injury throughout the entire playoffs. He's not going to be at 100%. He's going to be out there and have the same last name and number as the best right tackle in football, but I doubt he's going to play like it. And that's, again, no fault of his own. He's still a fantastic player. He's still the best right tackle in football. He's just hurt. He's just flat out hurt. The other part of that is Jalen Hurts. We don't know what he is in the playoffs. We've seen 1 game from him last year, and he got blown out. You can say that they didn't have A.J. Brown, and that's 100% true. So either way, you're agreeing that we still don't know what he is in the playoffs. With A.J. Brown, without A.J. Brown, we don't know what he is in the playoffs. So he's a gigantic question mark. Then you move to the Cowboys. And the reason that the Cowboys sit at number 2 in the NFC for me is just because that their defense is on the down end. They're going down. They have not played well so far this year. Obviously, their offense has ever since Dak Prescott's come back. Again, I've said it before, but they've only scored less than 27 since Dak has been back once, and they scored 24. But other than that, their team in general has put up 24, 48, 28, 40, 28, 54, 27, 34, 40, 27. Their team they've been able to put up points. That's not been the problem. Obviously, turnovers has been a huge problem. But the defense being on the downslope is one of the reasons that I don't have them as the favorite, as is Mike McCarthy. At the end of the day, yeah, he's been better this year, but he is still Mike McCarthy. He is still the guy that if Sean Payton was actually available and the Cowboys wouldn't have to give up any trade compensation to the Saints to get him, Mike McCarthy would be on the plane back to Pittsburgh, where he's from, tomorrow for Sean Payton immediately. It just makes too much sense. Yeah, McCarthy has ended the streak of the Cowboys not making back-to-back playoffs since, I think it was 2006 and 2007. Yeah, he ended that streak. But again, we watched Mike McCarthy win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers and then be almost incompetent from about 2015 to 2018. And even in his first year or last year with the Cowboys, his incompetence cost them a playoff game, 100%. Then you go to the 49ers, and the reason that the 49ers are the favorite for me, again, despite their quarterback situation where they have Brock Purdy, who's been playing above his draft grade, he's been playing above where he's been drafted so far this season. They have an elite playmaker. You talk about the Cowboys having an elite playmaker everywhere on their defense. The San Francisco 49ers have a playmaker on every position of their team except for at quarterback. And they didn't have one at quarterback with Trey Lance because he was a question mark. And they didn't have one at quarterback when they had Jimmy Garoppolo, because Jimmy Garoppolo, he's past the question mark at this point. We know what he is, and he's not very good. He's in that category. Hey,
you watch it.
Hey,
you watch it. I know this is your show.
Hey,
don't slander Jimmy G. Don't slander Jimmy.
He can catch this slander all the time. Hey, when you win an NFC championship throwing the ball 8 times, you deserve some slander.
That's how the game plan was. Not Jimmy's fault. That's the game plan.
And that is part of the reason that I like the 49ers. Truly, because they have the ability to they have an ability that no one else in the league has, to completely take the ball out of their quarterback's hands and still win the game. They could run the ball. You could tell me,
bro.
You could tell me right now.
No one gives Mac Jones slack for throwing the ball 3 times last year against Buffalo.
Yes, we did.
No one gives Mac Jones slack last season for throwing the ball 3 times. You know why? Because that was the game plan. It was a messy day. You don't throw the ball in those conditions. That was the game plan. The game plan against that team was, look, we're just going to run the ball down their throats, and it works. I'm just saying.
Again,
the quarterback should not get slandered for the game plan being what it is. It's not his fault. He still has to execute.
Okay, well, you take
here's the thing. He only threw the ball 8 times.
Let's talk about that Mac Jones game.
Hold on. Wait. He only threw the ball 8 times.
What was the Bills game plan? What was the Bills' game plan?
To smack him in the mouth, and they failed. That's the point.
They did fail, but why was their game plan to smack him in the mouth rather than just hand the ball off every play? Because they had a guy at quarterback. Because they had a guy at quarterback.
Because they're stupid. Yes. Listen, you can do this all you want. Here's the deal. Okay, here's the deal, right? Jimmy G only threw the ball 8 times. Okay?
Yeah.
That means there's still 8 chances for a ball to be fumbled by Jimmy G, for a ball to be picked off from a bad pass by Jimmy G. He still did his job. So you can give me all this, he only threw the ball 8 times, whatever you want. When you have the rushing attack that San Francisco had in that game, when you have the defense that San Francisco had in that game, when you have the weapons that San Francisco has, you can afford to only throw the ball 8 times, because that's still 8 chances for the defense to force a pass breakup, for the defense to get a sack, for the defense to force a fumble, for the defense to get a pick and crack the game wide open. And they didn't do that. It's not Jimmy's fault he was asked to throw the ball 8 times. It would have been Jimmy's fault if he was only asked to throw the ball 8 times and they lost, or if he was only asked to throw the ball 8 times and he turned the ball over. Now you can look at me and say, let's slander Jimmy G. I do not tolerate Jimmy G disrespect, because in the last 20 years, there's only 4 guys that have won a higher percentage of their games than Jimmy G. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson.
Guy.
So,
you're a quarterback.
Let's just call a spade a spade here. Let's just call a spade a spade. Let's call a spade a spade. When Jimmy G plays football, the 49ers are 38-14. When he doesn't play football, they're like 10-30. It's night and day.
Hey. Well, okay. Well, here's the difference. Here's the difference. I'm not saying Jimmy G Jimmy G is a starting NFL quarterback. He's just on the lower end of starting NFL quarterbacks. You know who's not even a backup level quarterback? C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins, who took care of most of the other games where Kyle Shanahan was the coach.
He was also whoa. He was also hurt when they were playing though. He was hurt.
Right.
He didn't lose the job to them. He was hurt.
No. Right. But my point is that everyone loves to bring up that Shanahan stat where it's like, oh, without Jimmy G, he's this. It's like, okay,
no, it's not a Shanahan stat. It's a Jimmy G stat.
Right. But the point is like, who is filling? Like, if you put Derek Carr in that situation, they're winning the same amount of games that they do with Jimmy G. That's
because Derek Carr's better than Jimmy G.
Right. The point is, right, well, about 20 quarterbacks in the NFL are better than Jimmy G. My point is that he's a below average.
That's a stretch.
We can name them. We'll throw that at the end. We'll throw that after we finish the NFC, and
there are not 20 quarterbacks in the NFL better than Jimmy G.
Right here.
Let's be serious.
We'll do it. Josh Allen.
Of course.
Tua.
I personally am taking Jimmy G over Tua. Call me crazy.
I think it's close, at least.
It's close, but it's not a clear cut. Tua is better than Jimmy G.
Yeah. Dak Prescott.
Of course you take Dak over
Jalen Hurts. No.
Yeah. No. Yes, you take Jalen Hurts over
Jalen Hurts. Lamar Jackson.
Before this season, not so much. Of course you take Lamar Jackson over. Yeah, you take
Lamar Jackson. All right, Joe Burrow, obviously.
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson. Granted,
we haven't seen Deshaun Watson play real football in a year and a half. Doesn't look better than Jimmy G this year.
He's not better than Jimmy G this year, but I'm taking Deshaun Watson.
No, I am too. Just saying.
Okay, so that we're at 6. Justin Fields.
I think it's close. I think it's a lot closer than people want to admit. And I think Justin Fields is better, but I think Justin Fields is better because of his legs.
Okay.
And that's all.
Aaron Rodgers.
Of course you're taking Aaron Rodgers.
Kirk Cousins.
I think it's close. Again, Jimmy G and Kirk Cousins are on the same tier of quarterbacks.
Okay.
Like Kirk Cousins is just Jimmy G with lesser weapons, so he has to do more, and because he has to do more, his numbers are better. That's all this is here. Although Jimmy G wins primetime games and Kirk Cousins doesn't.
All right, let's go Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence is better than Jimmy G. I think he proved that this year for sure.
All right. Let's go Jameis.
Not taking Jameis.
Not taking Jameis. Tom Brady.
Yeah. I mean, it's Tom Brady.
All right. Yeah. Patrick Mahomes.
Again, it's Patrick Mahomes.
Derek Carr.
It's close. It's a lot. I love Derek Carr, and I will take Derek Carr over Jimmy G. It is close, though. I think it's a lot closer than people want to admit. I love Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr's top 15.
What is it? Justin Herbert.
Oh, yeah. You take Justin Herbert over Jimmy G, yeah?
Kyler Murray.
Look, it's close. I think
if it's close, I'm giving it to me.
I think I think you can go either way. It depends on what you're looking at. Kyler Murray is very inconsistent. He's very inconsistent.
If we're
being poor man's Lamar Jackson, and he's very inconsistent.
All right. Healthy Matthew Stafford. What we saw from Matthew Stafford this year is not what we've seen for
a healthy Matthew Stafford you take over Jimmy G. Of course.
Would you take Trey Lance currently over Jimmy G?
No.
Geno Smith.
No.
All right. So we're at 17. We were at 17 quarterbacks.
That's fine. My point was that he's top 20. That's all.
Okay. He's borderline top 20.
He is in the what I'm saying about Jimmy G is Jimmy G is in that 16 to 20 range of guys that it has to be a perfect storm. And Kirk Cousins is in that bucket too of you need a perfect storm, right? If Kirk Cousins is playing in San Francisco, Kirk Cousins, I think, would be doing exactly what Jimmy G is doing, which is not a lot. The defense is A1. The O-line is perfect. The rushing game is top notch. You've got a lot of receivers, right? What we look at with Kirk Cousins is, and again, this goes back to them being 11-0 in one-score games. Kirk Cousins has to do more because the defense isn't that good. It's average at best, although it's been okay this season, but that's an average defense. The O-line is average at best, right? Aside from Justin Jefferson, and TJ Hawkinson, who they just acquired via trade, there's no one to throw the ball to. Like, we've had an APB out for Adam Thielen pretty much all season. Adam Thielen has not had a good season this year, and he didn't really have a good season last year either. And, of course, you have Dalvin Cook, but Dalvin Cook has an injury problem. You have Alexander Madison as well. But, like, if you take Jimmy G and you put Kirk Cousins where Jimmy G is, you put Jimmy G where Kirk Cousins is, the things that we say about Kirk Cousins, we would say about Jimmy G if Jimmy G was in Minnesota, because he's asked to do more. And I think the reason why we don't give Jimmy G much respect is because he's not asked to do so much. We look at that and we say, oh, it's because he's limited. But if you put Jimmy G in a scenario like Minnesota, where he's only really got 2 reliable weapons and he's got a solid run game, but the O-line's not that great and the defense isn't that great, I think we'd see Jimmy G tap into a different level. There's sometimes you don't have to be all of this because there's so many other great things around you. And I think that's what Jimmy G, unfortunately, it's been a double-edged sword, because he's had success of it. But because he's had that success in San Francisco, and because San Francisco is such a well-built organization, it's such a well-run organization, people give the credit to Kyle Shanahan, they give the credit to the defense, they give the credit to the organization, instead of giving the credit to the quarterback. So it's not that I'm a quarterback wins guy, like you were saying earlier, because winning and losing is a team stat. I recognize that. But what I'm saying is, if this was any other quarterback in Jimmy G's shoes, with Jimmy G's win-loss record, they would get the respect that Jimmy G doesn't get. That's all.
Fair enough. Either way, this entire thing, it makes my point a little bit about the 49ers and why they are the number 1 contender in the NFC, because they have, again, a playmaker at everywhere on the field. They have Christian McCaffrey at running back. Obviously, they have Deebo Samuel, who's a wide receiver who can also kind of play running back. You have Brandon Ayuk. You have George Kittle. You have, I didn't even mention Kyle Juszczyk. Like, they have playmakers everywhere on that offensive side of the ball. Then on defense, 2 elite linebackers in Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. They have Tailunga Hufanga, Hufanga at safety. They have Travarius Ward, who's really stepped into his own at cornerback. Obviously, we talked about Nicky Bosa. They just have everything you could possibly want in an NFL team, which is why they're number 1. And again, the experience, and although Kyle Shanahan has kind of melted down in some of the biggest games, obviously 28-3, he was calling the offense in that one. The Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes, he was calling the offense in that one. You could talk about even the NFC Championship game last year, where they kind of melted down. You take a look at it. He has experience. It's bad experience, but he has experience. And he has shown the ability to take the ball out of his quarterback's hands and win important games, like the NFC Championship versus Green Bay in 2019. They ran the ball for over 300 yards. They can do it again. They could do it on anybody. And now they have an actual elite running back to do so. They're not running back there with people who were no names like Raheem Mostert before that game. They have Christian McCaffrey. They have a top 5 back, a consensus top 5 back.
Yep.
They're the team that I'm scared of the most. If I'm a fan of anyone else in the NFC, I'm terrified of going up against the Niners. They're my last draft pick for anybody. I'm taking. I'd rather play the Eagles 3 times and have to beat them all 3 than play the 49ers.
Sure.
I agree. For you? Yeah.
No, I agree. It is as cut and dry as you made a team. I agree, 100%. I don't really have anything else to add, actually.
Well, then let's move it over to the AFC. They really also kind of have 3 main contenders. They have the Chiefs, they have the Bengals, and then they have the Bills. 2 of these teams we've seen do it. We've seen the Kansas City Chiefs be in the AFC Championship game every year that Patrick Mahomes has been the starter. We've seen the Bengals beat Patrick Mahomes in Patrick Mahomes' house last year and go on to the Super Bowl. The Bills is the team that we haven't really seen do it yet. And their entire selling point this year was the reason that they're going to be better is because they added Von Miller, but Von Miller tore his ACL, and he's not going to be playing the rest of the season. For me, my favorite in the AFC, again, it could change after this podcast. It quite literally could change. Monday night is when the Bengals and the Bills play, and it could change my mind a little bit, because I think if the Bengals beat the Bills, I think it's probably the Bengals. But since that game has not happened yet, give me the Kansas City Chiefs, just because they're the team who I've seen consistently do it more. Granted, the Bengals were the last team to do it. They went in there, they beat them. The Bills, their entire selling point to why they were supposed to be the best team this year was Von Miller and the health of their team and the strength of their team, which was their defense. Micah Hyde, done for the year. Von Miller, done for a year. At some point, that's going to bite them. Truly, at some point, it's going to bite them. I mean, you see, they were playing, I think they've been playing some of their younger corners. I think Kyer Elam has started to play a little bit. They were playing, and in the Packers game, they were playing, I believe it was a 7th round pick over Elam, or maybe that was the first game of the season where they were doing that. I don't know. And Josh Allen, we talked about Dak Prescott and how he's having trouble hanging on to the football. Josh Allen, although he's kind of turned it down a little bit, he's having that same sort of issue with turnovers. And they haven't played and been super impressive since that Kansas City game earlier this year, where the difference was Von Miller, who had, I believe, he had a sack and a half, I believe, a sack, 2 sacks, something like that. He also forced the interception at the very end of the game to seal it for Buffalo. Kansas City is the team I've seen it do it the most consistently. But I mean, you can make a case for any of these teams. If Buffalo beats Cincinnati, Buffalo's beat both Cincinnati and Kansas City, they're likely going to have the 1 seed. If Cincinnati beats Buffalo, Cincinnati's beat both Buffalo and Kansas City, and they were the AFC representative in the Super Bowl last year. And Kansas City, they just have the best quarterback in football, and we've seen them do it. We've seen them go to the Super Bowl 2 out of the last 4 years, 2 out of the last 3 years. We've seen them every AFC championship that they've gone to, they've either won or it's gone to overtime. Like this is a team who's going to be in the AFC championship. For me, it's the Chiefs. You disagree. I think it's the Chiefs. Who I think I know who you're going to go with Joseph Lee Burrow.
I'm a very predictable guy. Listen. Let's cut straight to the chase here.
Yeah.
Let's start with the Bills, then we'll go to the Chiefs, then we'll go to the Bengals. Actually, we'll start with the Chiefs because the Chiefs is very simple. Joseph Lee Burrow owns the Kansas City Chiefs. Joseph Lee Burrow, for all intents and purposes, is Patrick Mahomes' father. Case closed. Done. Now, the Bills, the Buffalo Bills, and I was one of them, we crowned the Bills in the offseason, and they were going to be the team to make to the bowl. Now, here's the one thing I will give credit to the Bills for, because I didn't know this until earlier today when I was prepping for the show. There's one team in the National Football League that has had 100 yards of rushing every game they've played this season. It's the Buffalo Bills, which is shocking to me because they don't have a good running back. They don't have a run game. What does that let you know? That Josh Allen has been the reason why they've had 100-plus rushing yards at least every game this season. That's number one. Number two, since week 6, no one has turned the ball over more than Josh Allen. No one has had a worse QBR than Josh Allen. No one's had a lower completion percentage than Josh Allen. Josh Allen has not been playing efficient football since week 6 when they beat Kansas City. Okay. He also leads the league in red zone turnovers. He hasn't been good. He's not been the MVP candidate that I thought he was going to be. He's not been the MVP candidate that Bills Mafia thought he was going to be. He's not been the MVP candidate that most of the world thought he was going to be. Now, I may have fudged the numbers a little bit, but the fact remains Josh Allen has not been statistically one of the elite quarterbacks that we've expected him to be since the week 6 win in Kansas City against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills, to your point, their selling point this season was now we have Von Miller. Now we have an anchor for this defense. Well, as you alluded to, he's gone. So here's the deal. Damn Zach Taylor, because he's not a good head coach, and it doesn't really matter to me.
I'm very glad you said that, because there is now a narrative that's going around that Zach Taylor is a good head coach. I've talked about it. My friend Cameron has been in the chat for most of this. He's kind of, I don't know what team he likes because he kind of bounces around. He kind of picks by players. He is on our side with Zach Taylor is not a good head coach. And if anything, he is the reason that they wouldn't be the AFC representative. Because you take a look at what he's done throughout this entire year. And even into last year, the most important play of the game in the Super Bowl last year. And you have Samaje Perine out there. You have Samaje Perine out there. You even take a look at what they did this year. Playing the Dallas Cowboys. Granted, a Dallas Cowboys team with Cooper Rush. The whole, let's leave Micah Parsons unblocked side of, that has never worked out for anyone ever. Not once. Has not worked out. Like, hey, that'll trick him. Having no one in front of one of the top 2 defensive players in all of football. Let's leave him unblocked. I mean, you had to have Joe Burrow. I don't know if it was that game or if it was a couple games later, yelling at the sideline, no empty. Just no empty. You cannot keep letting me get killed, Zach. You can't. He's a really bad head coach. I'm glad you brought that up. I always have room in my heart for some Zach Taylor slander. I had to let it fly here today.
So again, Kansas City can't beat the Bengals, can't be the favorites. The Bills, by all intents and purposes, the Bills right now have a Josh Allen problem. Not a massive one, but they have one.
Yeah.
Bills have a Josh Allen problem. The Chiefs can't get past the Bengals. The Bengals, Joe Burrow and the Bengals, right? Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Jamar Chase and the Bengals, Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins. O-line's gotten better. Not the best, but it's gotten better. That defense is okay. This is why the Bengals are the favorites. The Bengals are the favorites. Name me one team in the AFC that you could say definitively would beat the Bengals in the playoffs. There's not one.
Nope.
They've already beaten the Chiefs. I think they can beat the Bills. No matter what happens on Monday, I think the Bengals can beat the Bills. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, right? The Dolphins are not beating the Bengals. And I understand that the Bengals beat the Dolphins earlier this season. That was because Tua missed the game. I still think with a healthy Tua, the Dolphins lose to the Bengals. Now, what I want to see, and what I think in all likelihood we could see, is Bengals, Chargers, AFC Championship game. And here's why. The Chargers, I think, are a sleeper pick. I don't think they're Super Bowl contenders. I don't think they're bona fide. I don't think they're going to make it. But the Chargers are a playoff team right now, and they've been riddled with injury all season. Like Eckler's missed time, Allen's missed time, Mike Williams missed time, Derwin James, I think, has missed some time. Like everyone on this team at some point, except for Justin Herbert, has missed time, and they're still in a position. They are in a similar position to where the Bengals were this season. Extremely underrated, and no one's paying attention. I honestly think that a Bengals-Chargers AFC Championship game would be fireworks. It'd be Burrow versus Herbert box office. But the Bengals are the favorites because this is what we do in the NFL, right? What we say is you are the favorites until proven otherwise, right? Well, the team that represented the AFC in the Super Bowl last year was Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. And despite the rough start to the season, the Bengals are still in the thick of things. The Bengals can lock up the division this week. And whether they lock up the division or not, the Bengals, like you mentioned, are still in line for the 1 seed. Let's talk about how crazy that is. The Bengals have already beaten the Chiefs. If the Bengals get the job done on Monday night and they beat the Bills, as long as the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Bengals have the same record, guess who gets the first round bye? The Cincinnati Bengals. The same Cincinnati Bengals that everyone said was a one-hit wonder. The same Cincinnati Bengals everyone said no one has faith in. The same Cincinnati Bengals everyone said, oh, they're not going to put money into the O-line. Oh, and then he spent as much money on the O-line as any team in the history of football. Well, not in the history of football, but as much money in the O-line as you possibly could this season from any team in the offseason this year. The same Cincinnati Bengals team that still has Joe Burrow, that still has Jamar Chase, still has T. Higgins, still has Tyler Boyd, still has Joe Mixon. This is a football team that is going to be competing for a championship. So earlier you mentioned that the Chiefs are likely going to be AFC Championship game this year, and I paused. And the reason I paused is if the Chiefs, Bills, and Bengals all have the same record, the Bengals will be 1, the Bills will be 2, the Chiefs would be 3 because they've lost to both teams. So the Chiefs, they get their first game, right? The Bills, they get their first game. The Kansas City Chiefs have never played a road playoff game.
The Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. Yes.
The Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes have never played a road playoff game. The Buffalo Bills at home in the playoffs with Josh Allen at quarterback don't lose, if I'm not mistaken. So we're talking about a 2-3 matchup where the Bills, who don't lose at home, have to play a team in the Chiefs under Pat Mahomes who've never been on the road. That's a fireworks matchup. The Bills know how to beat the Chiefs. We saw it in week 6. And you can say what you want about how it was week 6. It doesn't matter. That game mattered to the Bills. It mattered to the Chiefs. It's an important game. I don't know if we're going to see the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game this year. I think AFC Championship game this year is Bills-Bengals. And I think the Bills are going back. I think the Bengals are going back to the Super Bowl this year. I do.
See, and here's the
and I think they should be the favorite. They're the most complete team in the AFC. They are. Of the three.
Of the three, I'll give you most complete. Of the three, I'll give you most complete. Here's the problem. The problem that I have with it is, well, one, the Chiefs would still have to lose one game because currently right now the Chiefs are 12-3. the Bills are 12-3, and then the Bengals are 11-4. So they would need the Chiefs to lose one game to wind up being having them all have the same record.
Wait, what's the Bills schedule?
What's
the Bills record? I'm sorry.
The Bills record is 12-3. The Bills are 12-3, the Chiefs are 12-3, and the Bengals are 11-4. So they would need to be able to.
The Bills are going to lose to the Bengals this week, and then.
So then it brings them down to 12-4. They're both at 12-4, and the Chiefs would have to lose one of their last two. The problem is that they play the Broncos, who are one of the worst teams in football, and they'll be playing the Raiders, who will be starting.
But they're going to rest their starters by the time they get to the Raiders, though.
Will they? Because
this is what the Chiefs do. The Chiefs do this. Once they get that, this is what they do.
Right, but they can't they cannot lock up the 1 seed this week. They can't.
But they're gonna rest their starters, bro.
I don't think they will. If the 1 seed's on the line, they're not resting the starters.
What are the odds Jarrett Stidham, last game of the season, beats the Chiefs? Could you imagine?
Could you imagine
the zero. I agree. But the pandemonium would be crazy.
It would. The discourse would be crazy.
Here's another thing too. And I know I've been hard on the Broncos all year. What if this week against the Broncos play the best game of Rush just fixes it?
Well, hey, listen. I don't think that's gonna happen.
I don't either. The what if game is a very dangerous game, right? I understand.
It definitely is.
I think that would be big for the Broncos. If the Broncos win this game and Russ plays good, then that means that Nathaniel Hackett was the problem and not Russell Wilson, and that would be massive. Because that's the question now: was it Nathaniel Hackett or was it Russell Wilson? Russell Wilson needs to ball out this week against the Chiefs, and I think he can. I really, really, really think he can. And I think that'd be massive for the Broncos. Obviously, just to play spoiler for the Chiefs, at least just that one little way. I think they could do that. It'd be massive.
They could. Anything can happen in a one-off game. Do I think that it will happen? No, I would bet pretty heavily on the Chiefs. But yeah, I again, for me, it's the Chiefs have been my team that I thought was going to win the AFC, or my favorite.
You being a homer. Never want to take any risks. And Emmitt, that's your problem.
No.
Never want to take any risks.
No, here's the risk I took this year. No, everyone else on the Bolt, everyone chose Buffalo.
Choosing the Chiefs isn't a risk.
I didn't say it was. No. And here's the thing. Everyone first off, I made a bet and I won the bet now that the Chiefs weren't going to win the division. That was light work.
Speaking of
light work.
You said you bet that the Chiefs weren't going to win the division?
No. Everyone else picked someone else to win.
Speaking of bets, I know he's on TV now.
Where is he? Hey.
I can't even call him Squabo. Where's Noah?
Noah.
Where you at, bro?
He needs to pay up.
I need to see you in that green and gold, bro. We made a bet and you talked all this. I need to pull the clip from that show and just post it everywhere.
We've been in contact. He's going to be wearing one of my jerseys. Since we aren't living in the same city anymore, it's hard for me to get it to him. But hey, at some point he is going to be wearing. I think the only one that's going to fit him, because he's just a lot more muscular than I am. But I think the only one's going to. He has a Zadarius Smith jersey coming his way. He's going to be doing that a nice little podcast with you in a Zadarius Smith jersey is what it sounds like.
Well, the agreement was an Aaron Rodgers jersey. I can let it slide. I guess. I can let it slide.
It's green and gold.
As long as it's green and gold.
It's green and gold.
All that trash to me about the Rams being this and that. It just.
No, well, I told him it was a dumb bet the second he made it too. The second he made it, I was like, it's not going to work out for you. Obviously I didn't see it coming in a, Packers must-win game. Packers must-win game where the Rams are starting Baker Mayfield. I did not see that coming, but the principle of it all stands. We've talked about a lot today. We've talked about, can the Packers beat the Vikings? We talked about a potential Davante Adams trade back to the Packers. We've talked about the Cowboys and whether or not they can win the Super Bowl this year. We've talked about who the favorites are in the NFC and AFC. And honestly, the best part of all of it, I think, was our Jimmy G debate. And that clip is probably going to be the first one to go up on YouTube, on socials. That one's going to be fantastic.
You think I'm ashamed as a human being?
No. I didn't think you were. No, I didn't say you were ashamed to be a Jimmy G truther. I just think,
stand by what I said.
Hey, and that's good. And that's good. Marcus, where can they find you?
Bro. Okay. Listen. It is 4:15. It was actually 4:14:15, but whatever. It's almost 4:15, which means there's 7 hours and 45 minutes left in 2022. Okay. At the beginning of this year, I told everybody that will listen that we would go and hit 150 subscribers by the end of the year. Okay. Usually I come on here and I tell you guys you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and all this other stuff. No. I just need 6 people. I need 6 people to go on YouTube, go talk with Marcus, or you can search up GTB Marcus at GTB Marcus and subscribe to the channel so that I can hit 150 subscribers on the channel by the end of the year. Emmitt's been on the channel before. No, I know he's ducking me. He's been on the channel before. Steezy's been on the channel. Look, there's a year's worth of content to watch. We're coming out strong next Friday, the first Friday of the new year, with our first episode of 2023. We're going to talk some football, but go to YouTube, subscribe to the channel so we can hit 150 before the clock strikes midnight tonight. I would greatly appreciate it. Let's please hit 150 by the end of tonight. Thank you.
And guys, I made it a little bit easier for him. I thought I was subbed, but I wasn't. I was checking that up. And now I'm subbed. So you got 5 to go. You got 5 to go. We're gonna push this out. This will be the first thing out on socials, by the way. We'll get you to 150. Again, for me, at Emmitt J. Sevores on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, pretty much anywhere you can. At the Emmitt Sevores Show on YouTube. I believe that one's also Instagram. At the ES Show on Twitter. At GTP Marcus. I know he didn't want to plug it, but at GTP Marcus on pretty much any social media you could possibly want to. Guys, Happy New Year. Happy new show to me. This is episode 1 of the Emmitt Sevores Show, and we will see you next time.